Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Welcome to the IBM Think Digital Summit, the Middle East edition. In this session, we will have a forward-looking conversation on rethinking 2021 as the world transitions into the new normal. The new normal will bring changed industry structures, market positions, consumer behaviors, with the rise of the contact-free economy and above all, a completely transformed workforce. We will discuss what it takes to build agile organizations operating in multi-cloud infrastructure, leveraging data and AI to redefine revenue streams, business processes, and supply chains, while mitigating the operational and security risks associated. I'm pleased to be joined by three thought leaders from the Economist Group, IDC and EMIR to give us a global, regional and industry perspective and help us really rethink 2021. First, please let me welcome Robert Willock from the Economist Group to give us a macroeconomic global view. Welcome, Robert. How are you today?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us on this. Really, Robert, as organizations are going through a phase of accelerated digital transformation, please help us set the scene for 2021.
Thank you, Bashar. Good morning, everybody. Yes, I just wanted to provide some context to today's debate and outline a few themes that I think are important for business leaders to be considering for the year ahead. Now, firstly, the shape and pace of economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Global GDP will have fallen by 4.7% this year, though that average masks some significant regional and country-by-country variations. Global GDP growth next year will be 4.2%, according to the Economist Intelligence Unit's latest forecast. So that means that the global economy and most countries' economies, including those here in the Middle East, will still be smaller at the end of 2021 than they were at the end of 2019, even as the distribution of vaccines begins to boost confidence and enable governments to lift restrictions. Now, one unusual phenomenon that we will see in 2021 is that emerging markets will grow slower than developed economies. They have higher borrowing costs, they have less fiscal room for manoeuvre, weaker health systems, and some macroeconomic imbalances that will work to their disadvantage. And they will also, probably, sadly, be at the back of the queue when it comes to vaccine distribution. Now, from a tech perspective, they have relatively weak infrastructure, insufficient internet bandwidth, low quality data, and a lack of supportive regulatory frameworks. Now, even once the pandemic abates, if the vaccines prove effective, it will cause some second order effects that will have a lasting impact. Sovereign debt will be at record levels thanks to huge fiscal stimulus packages that have been deployed by governments to mitigate the effects of COVID-19. Unemployment will be high and jobs will be scarce, especially for school and college leavers. Now, we expect the burden of these two symptoms of the pandemic to fall disproportionately on corporates, both in terms of taxation and in terms of expectations that they will provide opportunities and training for the jobless. So, the application of innovative fourth industrial revolution technologies and the acceleration of companies' digital transformation plans will be key to generating the business growth required to support the recovery.
Now, Robert, as businesses and consumers increasingly use technology, the data they generate creates opportunities and responsibilities at the same time. Please share a view on how businesses are using data to improve products and services, observing regulations on privacy and the guidelines that they need to work within.
Sure. Well, firstly, it's worth stating that we at the Economist Intelligence Unit, we love data. We use it for forecasting and scenario planning on behalf of our clients. So it's not hard to persuade us that data are the world's most valuable resource. As we are in the Middle East, let's explore a relevant regional analogy. You've often heard it said that data are to this century what oil was to the last one, a driver of growth and change. Flows of data have created new infrastructure, new businesses, new monopolies, new politics, and crucially, new economics. Now, in some ways, in many ways, data are not like oil. Digital information is unlike any other commodity. It's extracted, refined, valued, bought and sold in different ways. It changes the rules for markets and it demands new approaches from regulators. Now, many a battle will be fought over who should own and who should benefit from data. But in other ways, data are like oil. They both have little value in themselves, but huge value in what they can power. While oil drove the machines of yesteryear, data will drive the machines of tomorrow. Control of data will confer power, money, and influence in the way oil used to confer those things. Wars were fought over oil. Wars will probably be fought over data. If not military wars, then certainly trade wars. The US-China trade war, for example, is not really about how much soybean or Harley-Davidsons the Chinese buy. It's about technological and therefore economic global leadership. For corporates, technology has become central to their future plans and the backbone on which they are launching new business models. It's altering both internal and external business operations. Now, according to our research, the technology trends considered most important by businesses today are big data, analytics, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and cloud computing. And these technologies are being used to improve operational efficiency, expand internationally, and improve customer experience, all of which contribute to corporate growth. But it won't happen by itself without the vision, leadership, and technical capabilities required to maximize the use of technology. And for big data, that means developing the right algorithms and attracting, training, and retaining the right people. It also requires the proper management of data and data privacy, which is an increasingly urgent issue for regulators and lawmakers. Whether they regard themselves as data-centric or not, companies need to be aware of data that originated from their customers and other third parties to make sure it's carefully controlled and governed. We're already seeing governments around the world sharpening their legislative tools when it comes to potential privacy abuses and antitrust violations by tech companies.
Interesting. We live in a world of multi-cloud, with countries and regulated industries like banking, insurance, retail, updating and imposing regulations all the time, specifically around sustainability, digital tax. How would that impact strategies for businesses and governments when it comes to cloud around the world?
Well, the benefits of cloud have long been clear. These include having access to your data from anywhere, as long as you have an internet connection, relatively low and variable costs, and scalability both up and down. And that's been hugely important for companies in sectors worst affected by the global pandemic. But cloud technologies have not been easily accepted by risk-averse organizations. The idea of having sensitive company data hosted outside the organization, or indeed the country, raises concerns, while issues of security and intellectual property are still mentioned as barriers to cloud adoption. Operating across multiple jurisdictions, especially in tightly regulated sectors, can mean being subject to different and ever-evolving rules. The shifting landscape is not surprising when you consider the challenges faced by governments and regulators who frankly can't hope to understand the technologies and their risks, as well as the businesses that develop, own and operate those technologies. But governments and regulators being slow to create a fair and level playing field for providers and their customers is nothing new. So consider the invention of the automobile. In the late 19th century, 150 years ago, in the UK, the Locomotive Act specified that a person should walk in front of a car with a red flag to warn of its approach. The speed limit was 4 miles an hour in countryside and 2 miles an hour in towns. And plainly this law, born of a fear and a misunderstanding of something new, negated most of the huge benefits of car ownership and operation. And it took 30 years to get rid of the flagman and to raise the speed limit. Now these days the rules governing the safe and responsible operation of cars are similar the world over, although of course small differences do remain from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So if you see early government attempts to regulate new inventions in that context, you can see that there is often a process by which authorities have to catch up with new technologies. Now hopefully it won't take quite so long in this instance. Now no business likes nasty surprises or unexpected changes that can disrupt its operations. So our advice would always be to work with other businesses, trade associations, policy experts who can help represent your interests, influence government and regulator policies, and keep you abreast of updates that are coming down the line. And equally, governments and regulators should engage with the business communities within their jurisdictions, within parallel sectors and within neighbouring territories, and aim for a degree of harmonisation where possible to avoid this potential spaghetti of regulations that will hamper the adoption of cloud technology and prevent it from achieving its full potential.
Thanks, Robert. This has been an insightful update on where we stand globally, whether it's the different GDPs, the different transformation that countries are seeing on their own and how things are going to work with us in the next in 2021, I believe.
Indeed. Thank you, Bashar.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome Ranjit Rajan from IDC to give us a different perspective. This time we will talk from an industry point of view. We will discuss what it will take to rethink 2021 given all the changes that we've had and experienced in 2020. So once again, Ranjit, thank you to the IBM Think Digital Summit, and I really look forward to hearing from you on your points of view for 2021. I know you've got a lot of data points and you can share with us a lot of input. So please provide a view on the digital transformation coming up in 2021 in terms of focus on data and AI, as well as the accelerated journey to cloud. How much workload will remain on-prem and how much will move into the cloud, would you think, in 2021?
Thank you, Bashar, and hello, everyone. The COVID crisis has led to an acceleration of digital transformation in the region. Over 55% of the Middle East CIOs we surveyed told us that they're accelerating existing digital transformation efforts even more to meet new customer and operational agility needs emerging from the COVID crisis. These digital initiatives are focused on a few key areas, namely scaling up online and contactless services for customers, transforming employee experience in the context of distributed work, driving automation to improve operational efficiencies, and creating new digital business models and revenue streams. As organizations move from this recessionary phase to recovery in 2021 and beyond, they will start making targeted investments in longer-term digital innovation initiatives and digital roadmaps that will help them thrive in the next normal. However, there will continue to be pressure to optimize IT spending. To address this, organizations will continue to rationalize the spending on traditional IT infrastructure and increasingly shift from CapEx to OpEx spending by leveraging technology models such as cloud. As a result of this acceleration, the spending on digital transformation as a share of overall IT spending in MEA will rise from 25% in 2020 to 28% in 2021 and eventually to 37% in 2024. Emerging technologies such as AI, IoT, blockchain, and others already form about 50% of the digital transformation spending in the MEA region. And by 2024, this share will grow to nearly 60%. Specifically on AI spending in the Middle East and Africa will grow rapidly at 22% compound annual growth rate between 2020 and 24. Data is at the core of digital transformation. Data growth has accelerated during this crisis, and this growth will continue. Globally, the amount of data created over the next 3 years will be equal to the data that's been created over the past 30 years. However, a very small share of the useful data is being tagged and analyzed, and less than 1% of all this data is currently being leveraged by AI. This percentage will increase rapidly in the next few years. More and more of the data is being created and stored in the cloud. Cloud adoption is accelerating in this region, driven by the twin imperatives of digital transformation and IT cost optimization. Looking ahead, spending on public cloud will grow at 25% compounded annual growth rate between 2020 and 24 in the MEA region. Many organizations are also spending on private clouds. A third of the CIOs we surveyed in the Middle East are spending more on private clouds this year than earlier. In 2021, we see hybrid cloud and multi-cloud environments emerging rapidly across many organizations in this region. In this context, ensuring interoperability, performance, security, and compliance across such hybrid multi-cloud environments will become important. And to address these, effective design and planning for cloud will become critical. This cloud planning should include several different elements, such as internal cloud readiness assessments, cloud cost-benefit analysis, outlining of suitable migration roadmaps and paths, and establishment of metrics and KPIs for measuring cloud success.
Amazing, Ranjit. So only 1% of our data is being used for AI.
True.
And also 60% of our transformation budget in 2024 will be around data and AI.
Emerging technologies.
Emerging technologies.
Yes.
So really a very bright story for how quickly digital transformation is going to take place in our part of the world. Quickly, how do you think organizations will mitigate the risk that comes with an accelerated digital transformation, especially around cybersecurity and operational risks that accompanies that?
The technology shifts that we have seen during the COVID crisis, namely large-scale distributed work, accelerated cloud adoption, and the huge growth in applications have all led to a reprioritization of security risks. Security priorities are now essentially focused on 4 key areas. Securing the hybrid distributed workforce, ensuring privacy and data security, securing the cloud environment, and building capability to predict, monitor, and respond to threats in time. Application proliferation has created identity fragmentation, as user identities are not managed across applications consistently in many organizations. The identity life cycle needs to be managed more effectively, especially in a distributed cloud environment. Risks will be even further elevated when applications move to the edge. Edge computing allows organizations to perform computing tasks closer to where the data is generated. While big data will continue to be processed in the cloud or the core, increasingly, data from use cases that require lower latency and real-time processing will be processed at the edge. Edge will also be useful in instances where it is expensive to send data to the core, or where the data shouldn't have to leave the location for security reasons. Analytics and AI at the edge will enable more of these real-time use cases. By 2023, 70% of large enterprises worldwide will have varying levels of data processing at the IoT edge. And 5G, together with edge computing, will provide a number of IoT use cases. Examples for this include use cases such as telehealth, augmented and virtual reality-based training, autonomous vehicles, logistics management, asset tracking in industrial environments, etc. And as edge computing expands, building security into to this entire core edge endpoint stack will become increasingly important. Security controls that are aware of density, application, and device context will become essential. An application-centric security approach will become necessary.
Amazing. Amazing how edge computing with 5G will really give us another huge paradigm of change that we're going to be exploring. It's going to be a very interesting world for hybrid cloud. We're going to be able to push a lot of workloads right to the edge of the organization. Thank you very much, Ranjit. It's been outstanding to have you here with us, and great transition from an industry point of view to what I would call a regional and local point of view. So with me now is Trevor McFarlane from EMIR. I've known Trevor for many years. He's a very famous person in this part of the world, very knowledgeable about the dynamics of what's happening locally and the transformation that we are seeing in this part of the world. I've attended many of his seminars and advisory boards. Trevor, how do you see the region transitioning into the knowledge economy?
Bashir, first of all, thank you to IBM and congratulations on hosting a safe and successful event. It's wonderful to be here. What I would say with regards to the knowledge economy, I would speak directly to everybody in the virtual audience. And I would ask you to sit back and think about how profound Bashir's question actually is. If you had asked me this question 12 months ago, it would have been mildly boring. Let's be honest. We've been talking about diversification strategies in the Middle East for a very long time. Sometimes when it hasn't actually been happening in certain countries, other times when it has, like here in the UAE. And now, because this question is so important now, because of the psychodrama, COVID-19, epidemiological nightmare that we've seen in 2020, means that, as my colleagues previously have so eloquently articulated, we're seeing all these emerging trends, globally, regionally, etc. One, definitely, as my colleagues described, is this acceleration of digital and technological transformation. But what I would argue is one of the other trends that is coming out of the fact that we have ripped the fabric of how we do business is a greater emphasis on efforts to prevent climate change and environmental collapse. Think about as we move into 2021, many influential people around the world, policymakers, the new administration in the US, for example, will get serious about climate change. You also have corporates beginning to get very serious about climate change. More importantly than that, you have institutional investors. Think about recently how the institutional investor group for climate change, which influences $9 trillion in assets, is now putting serious pressure on corporates. In addition to that, you have big IOCs, international oil companies. Everybody in the virtual audience will be familiar with the recent report from BP, which laid out different scenarios, and broadly speaking, to boil it down, one of these scenarios is essentially that peak demand could have been in 2019. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but let's suppose for a second that we're moving in that direction. What it means is that the time that these economies have in the Middle East to diversify has just shrunk, which is why your question around artificial intelligence, around data, let's say the technologies underpinning the fourth industrial revolution more broadly, become incredibly important for these governments. They become important in terms of how they actually diversify their economies, but also, as again my colleagues have described, there's going to be a huge amount of benefit to these economies in terms of GDP contribution. And I would argue that the benefits of that distribution of GDP will be uneven. And over the course of this decade, there could be a bifurcation in terms of the countries that seize the opportunities from the fourth industrial revolution, from AI and data, etc., and the ones that don't. But the ones that do will be the ones that realize we have the technology, we have great providers like IBM and their peers, we have a willingness from certain governments to push ahead on this, but it will be talent. Talent will drive us towards that knowledge economy. And as we sit here in the UAE as an example, the UAE has become incredibly successful by having a hub for moving products, which is essentially Jebel Ali, moving people, Emirates, and moving money, DIFC. We need to become hubs for ideas, for brains, and for talent. That's how we'll shift, and that's why the fourth industrial revolution can potentially power this next wave of diversification.
Excellent. I think these are all very valid points. This is exactly what we're living here in the Middle East, the accelerated digital transformation, along with all the other situations that are around us, and how are we going to use talent to create a new knowledge economy to help us with that. Now, the next question is around this hybrid infrastructure that we're living in with different telco providers, local cloud providers, global cloud providers. How do you see the rules and regulations in this part of the world advancing? What's your view on the outcoming or expected data law that's going to come out soon in this part of the world, in the UAE, but also in the region?
Yeah, it's again, this question, if you go back to the last point again, this question perhaps a year ago would have been interesting, but because of what's happened with COVID, it's become even more interesting. And you touch on many of the points in terms of the regulatory environment shifting, but what I would say is think about the CIOs in our audience, right? Think about the people who are driving the technology agenda within these corporates. And think about, Bashir, the two slaps in the face that they have got in 2020.
Yeah.
They got one slap in the face that all of us received, which was the disruption to our lives because of COVID-19, disruption on our relationships, disruption on everything, right? How we actually function. The CIO also got another slap in the face, and that was the realization that what they thought they had many years to do, now they preferably should have had it done yesterday. Ideally, they have a year, maybe a little bit longer, to actually get this done now. Think about this analogy. If I'm a CIO, okay, last year, pre-COVID, with regards to my journey into the hybrid cloud digital infrastructure, I am sitting on a pleasure cruise. I am sitting on a cruise liner, and I'm waving out the window at everybody, and it's blue skies. I'm having a very nice time. I think my journey into the hybrid cloud is many years to go. COVID comes in, crash, bang, changes everything, and these same CIOs are now waving out the window saying, help, get me off this bloody ship and get me onto an Elon Musk-powered rocket ship that fast-tracks my digital transformation, not least around the hybrid cloud, because of the advantages that will come off the back of that, not least when you think about cost, right? Let's be honest, many corporates around the region at the moment, and local organizations as well, we have a knife to our throat with regards to we just have to cut costs. Sectors have been turned upside down through no fault of their own in many cases, and the attractiveness of moving into a hybrid cloud infrastructure with a pay-as-you-go service becomes very attractive also in terms of cost savings around maintenance, etc. And then you get all the benefits in addition to that in terms of scalability, agility, safety, privacy. So the landscape on this for a CIO has moved very, very quickly. And I would say the main issue comes back to, again, we know the technology is there. We know the benefits. It comes back to that question of, how do I get off this bloody ship and get me onto a rocket ship that fast-tracks my whole transformation into this journey?
Thank you, Trevor. This has been exciting about what's happening locally, and really the speed of change and the focus on diversification in this part of the world is really giving it a very, very distinct flavor that's really unique to this part of the world. At this point, I'd like to invite Ranjit and Robert back to join us here, and maybe we can have some questions and a conversation. One of the most frequent questions that's being asked is the future workforce. In 2020, we've seen a workforce that's been completely transformed. We're going to look at complete new working norms, and that's probably also going to change the way we interact and the whole IT infrastructure that we're looking at. Shall we start with you, Robert, on a word on the changed workforce of the future?
Yeah, well, first of all, let's focus on the region, and particularly those countries within the region that have high proportions of their population and the workforce as expatriates. What we've seen are large-scale job losses. We've seen huge pressures from organisations to cut costs, and many of those costs have fallen on the workforce. And in countries where the expatriate population is so large, relatively to the scale of their population, UAE, nearly 90%, Saudi, nearly 40%, reductions in expat employment will ultimately lead to reductions in overall population, because residency is essentially tied to employment. So we are likely to see some significant population and demographic changes here right across the region, and a number of skills will leave with those people. And the region needs to be careful that it doesn't let those skills walk out the door without knowing how to replace them. We don't want to do what we did in 2009, cut our workforce too deep and then have to hire it all back expensively and then retrain it. So that's first and foremost what I think we need to be aware of. As I said, I think the burden of the recovery from COVID will disproportionately fall on corporates, and it will be the expectation that corporates provide job opportunities, training, especially for school and college leavers, remedial training to get them ready for this new work environment. I wouldn't want to be a school or college leaver now if I didn't feel that I had the digital skills that are going to power the fourth generation technologies that will themselves then provide growth to these regional economies. So we need to be very, very aware of what is required, and that's the educational institutions as well as corporates, and we've all got to work together to make sure that we equip the youngsters in this region and older people like me with the skills that are required.
Ranjit, give us a view on the talent, the workforce of the future, and what does it look like in 2021 globally and here in this part of the world?
Yeah, so I think the future of work will be impacted by several elements. So one is the workforce, the other is the work culture, and then there's the workspace, the workplace itself. So I think from a workforce perspective, what we are seeing is that this region has a large proportion of the population which is under the age of 35. And a significant proportion of the population are what we call as Gen Z and millennials. So what we are seeing is that the workforce is increasingly becoming multi-dimensional and multi-generational. And so from a technology perspective, CIOs and CEOs now have to implement technologies that enable that enable employee experience for a multi-generational workforce. And that has impact on distributed work, so the employee experience or the experience the employees have when they work remotely, but also as they come back and start coming back to the offices, the kind of workspaces that they need are also going to be significantly different going forward. And also the mix of the workforce is changing. I think we will see a lot more automated digital workers. So we'll see a lot more of a hybrid human and digital workforce as well. So that's the other big challenge that we will see going forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Ranjit. Different question, Trevor. A lot of talk on the contact-free economy. Different way of thinking about everything we do. How's that going to take place locally? And I think we've got a great infrastructure. We can be one of the first to ride this wave and give good examples on the contact-free economy, whether it's in retail, aviation, government business. What's your view on that?
The view clearly is that COVID-19 has accelerated this already. We've seen this, and even if you look at some of the data coming out of Saudi in terms of use of ATMs and use of credit card usage has actually increased during COVID-19. As you mentioned rightly, we already have a digital infrastructure built up around that. So I think broadly speaking, it's a win-win for the region in terms of being able to capture the opportunities that come off the back of that. But governments really need to think about, yes, there's the payment solutions, there's fintech side of it, how they empower SMEs off the back of all of this. Because to Rob's point, his excellent point earlier on with regards to employment, let's be really clear and honest. What we've seen in terms of the employment market and how they've already changed, we've already seen dramatic shifts in terms of the amount of people that have left markets in the Middle East. We've already seen this dramatic shift in terms of cuts from corporates. And what you're going to see is what we've discussed today, this acceleration in cuts, in efficiency, how technology drives that, and then in turn, the type of skills that we'll need around of it. And the contactless economy will, of course, be part of that in terms of the talent. Everything comes back to, in a way, the point I made earlier on. The points at the top of an agenda for policymakers should be around how do we change our models to become hubs for brains, hubs for ideas, hubs to attract the best people. That comes into policy reforms and changes around how you become the best expat destination, how you become the best foreign investment, FDI destination as well. Because if you look at it, to Rob's point again, from the perspective of bringing people in, and this is true of your point, but more broadly around digital transformation, what you see is that the scalability of the workforce can be advantageous to some of these countries. If I'm from Ireland and the fourth industrial revolution wipes out 20% of the labour force, hypothetically, okay? Replace mundane jobs, create other high-value jobs. Perhaps we have to see how all that plays out. But let's suppose you're wiping out 20, 30%, or you have unemployment at 20 or 30%. That is a social burden that is not going to be accepted in Ireland. In a country like the UAE, you have a scalable workforce that can work to your advantage. They have a scalable workforce that can work to your advantage, and they have an agenda around technology that can work to their advantage as well. So, you know, the point you're making is only a small part of a broader story around how governments drive these policy changes from the top down. The governments that drive those policy changes will be the ones that garner the most benefit from the fourth industrial revolution, and there could very well be a bifurcation in terms of the Middle East to the countries that actually take advantage of this very unique change in the fabric of how we do things, and shape all of this decade, and there will be countries that don't take advantage of that.
Excellent. I really want to thank you all for joining us today and helping us rethink 2021, which promises to be a very exciting year, not less exciting than 2020, I guess. It's going to be a launch pad for a new way of thinking, a new normal, whether it's the workforce of the future, the contact-free economy, the whole digital infrastructure that will have to be very flexible, very adaptable. You mentioned we'll have more data in the next 3 years than we had in the last 30 years. You mentioned a lot of the things around regulation and transforming the way we look at businesses around the world, whether it's globally or locally. And of course, Trevor, your local and regional insight here has enriched this conversation tremendously. Thank you very much for being with us today. And thank you all of the virtual audience. And I hope you've had an interesting and insightful session that will help you rethink 2021. Thank you very much again for joining us.
Thank you, Bashir.
Thank you.
Thank you.